Good day, folks. Everything new under the sun. This PDF document is one from the survival documents video that I did, that I pulled, that I showed you how to collect from cityprepping.com and other websites. There's over 500 different PDFs from how to um, get food from animals, how to slaughter animals, to growing a garden, to getting fresh water, to how to things about medicine, and all sorts of knowledge and information that you might need in a survival type scenario, a grid down type scenario, whether that lasts for only 8 hours or 24 hours, or it lasts for 3 days or 3 months. It's all valuable information. If World War III starts, what's going to happen? They're going to take out communications first and foremost, and you're going to need a library on hand, whether that's encyclopedias like physical books on your shelves, or maybe a USB stick with a whole bunch of PDFs, so that when you bug out and you can get to your destination, you can pull this out and pull this up on any whatever remaining laptops or devices, and at least have some access to information. Now, this is a PDF labeled Some Thoughts on Disaster Communications. It's about what's going to happen in this person's understanding in the first 72 hours as communications go down, as the grid goes down. Very, very interesting. This happens to be by Bob Dyruff, Whiskey 6 Papa Oscar Uniform, an amateur radio person. And again, he's talking about his thoughts on disaster communications. So the first section here, before we get to what happens in the first 72 hours, talks about kind of what the main things are that are going to happen when there is a disaster. Critical communication requirements in a disaster. So you're talking about natural disaster, hurricanes, that sort of thing, where Hurricane Fiona went through the East Coast, and cell phones were down. Emergency services had trouble communicating. You could not text message people. We did revert to ham radio in that case, and other options, simply person-to-person communication. But it starts off by saying there's going to be a large increase in volume of messages and volume of message traffic. And that's one of the reasons why the cell phone networks went down. There was a huge increase in volume of traffic on the towers that were still up, that still had emergency power generation. Equipment outages occur at key locations. So again, if you have a cell phone tower go down, that's the only tower for kilometers and kilometers. If there's not multiple units or an antenna gets destroyed, your cell phone is going to go down. It's not going to work. The need arises for agencies to communicate with other agencies operating incompatible radio systems. So you have these emergency services, police, fire, ambulance, and they use different hardware, different frequencies, different ways to communicate. And they have trouble communicating when things go down. Now, that's what disaster scenario and committees and emergency operations centers are supposed to bring together, that confluence of communications, and they are the stand-in for that. But again, ham radio has been used for that in the past, to kind of bring agencies together and provide that cohesive network for communications. A need arises to contact locations at distances. So if all communications are down, within 100 kilometers of your location because a tornado went through, well, maybe you need to communicate or listen for communication from about 500 kilometers or 1,000 or 2,000, whatever it may be. And so there's a need for, and this is speaking directly about amateur radio, where you can talk all around the world, and it's going to give you the ability to communicate. Alternative methods of communicating, it says, volume data in printed form, teletype, high-speed packet facsimile. That's kind of old-fashioned stuff. Morse code. Morse code is an interesting thing because it's obscure to the regular public. Most people don't know how to understand or copy Morse code, also known as CW in the amateur radio world. And that gives it a bit of security, obscurity. Security through obscurity is what they call it. So if the majority of people have no idea how to understand CW, then it becomes a form of encryption ultimately for local communications. And then other communications, television, telephones, other things like that the government is going to use. So what happens in the first 72 hours? Let's take a look at this. I think this is interesting here. First 72 hours. In the early hours of an emergency into a disaster, it takes precious life-ebbing time and overcoming of obstacles to place fully activated mutual aid resources into operating position, i.e. get people with with communications options on the ground in the right places to transfer that. If someone's injured or hurt and communications are down, what are you going to do? You're probably not going to have someone coming for you. There's probably very few people listening for any calls for help, and you're not going to be able to use your cell phone likely. It's either going to be jammed because of the traffic, or it's going to be down because of whatever weather scenario or whatever it may be has occurred. The greatest concentration of relief efforts is generally to be found in the cities. The cities are where you're going to get the relief efforts. That's where the ambulances are going to be. So if you're out in the boonies, you need a way to help yourself, maybe to provide a little bit of medical aid. And that's what other PDFs that you can download and put on your USB stick will contain. How to make a splint, how to dress a wound, how to take care of particular sicknesses, maybe with natural options. The thing is, you don't want to be in a city, even though that may be where the bulk amount of the police officers and ambulance may be at that point in time. But will they get around? Can you communicate with them even in that case? On-scene commanders need to receive important information. With telephones overloaded or out of service, the local government and public safety radio channels are jammed. Communications problems develop rapidly. People, as more and more time goes by, people will get desperate. They will jam up and start communicating and taking up all the airways. And this is why you need to have multiple options: FRS, ham radio, GMRS. You need a AM, FM radio, maybe a shortwave radio, simply so that you can listen via multiple different ways, frequencies, and modes for life-saving information, for information from government on what they're doing. That may be helpful, that may be hindering, but information is a key to defense, survival, defense, etc. Information is big at that point in time. While urban areas experience more concentrated damage, suburbs, isolated areas of the county suffer from remoteness from fire departments, public works, law enforcement agencies, another. And that's what I said about being in a city. You're going to have that. Being out in the boonies, you're going to have to deal with that. You're on your own. So having, again, these PDFs and information is key. It says the public is often isolated, unable to call for help, or determine the nature or extent of the disasters, so as to make plans to wait it out. You need to understand to wait it out. Are you gonna try and evacuate if something's coming? If a cloud of radioactive dust is coming your way, maybe you need to bug out. Maybe you need to quickly put up your plastic tent shelter so that you can shelter for a number of hours or days from radioactive fallout, whatever it may be, right? Actually evacuate with some possessions, obtain physical aid from an impending catastrophe, offer aid to a relative or neighbor. Again, these are all things you need to think about in the first 72 hours, how you're going to deal with these, and you need to be prepared prior to. The first 72 hours, lack of information results in further attempted use of telephone. People will get desperate. They will use their cell phones more before their battery dies and try and get messages out there. Calls can often be received from out of town, but not made across town. And during Fiona, that's exactly what happened. You could not communicate locally, so that's a problem. Those living or traveling outside urban areas or unincorporated portions of the county are less able to receive essential services. The opportunity to call for help is often unavailable to most citizens in the first 72 hours. Again, this is a time period where you need to have your stuff on hand. It's not a time to go to Walmart in the first 72 hours. You need to have this prepped and stocked and know how to use it, because that's the time when emergency services will be booked up the most with other people who can't address issues themselves or are in emergency situations that need help. You need to be self-sufficient, and that's key. Occasionally, a passing public safety vehicle or equipped with an operational commercial utility amateur or CB radio can be accessed, assuming it is in contact with a person who can help. Too little information is gathered about public immediate needs and ways to meet them. Distorted public perceptions are gained through misinformation. So we have this introduction of misinformation, malinformation, disinformation. That's going to be a big deal, and it may not be on purpose. There may be information spread by people who are getting their news second, third, fourth hand from other people. Broadcast stations, and those that usually initially broadcast stations, it says, initially disseminate rumors in absence of factual information. So that's what happens in the first 72 hours. There's going to be a lot of misinformation about what's happening. So again, you need to be ready for all eventualities. Now, I'm not going to go through this whole thing, but it goes on and on. What is happening with people? Well, they're walking around aimlessly. They're seeking family and friends. They're trying to see who's alive, what kind of damage is there. You see this after any natural disaster, like a tornado or a hurricane. The first thing people do is hop in their cars, take a drive around, see the sights, see how many trees are down. I'm guilty of this as well, and see what damage there are. But police want you to stay off the roads, of course. Word circulates about shelter locations. Some displaced persons stay in homes. This is the other thing. Is your home intact enough to stay in it? Likely you should stay in it if you have resources, water, food, because you don't want to overwhelm these other stations, these shelters, where other people are going who may have to go there. Later, often too late, information trickles in about problem areas, i.e. that you should stay out of, and it's overlooked due to lack of communication. So again, when comms are down, things go sideways. Once the immediate threat of life is passed, survival instincts prevail. Printed what to do instructions are located and followed, and people operate essentially on their own for an indefinite period of time. This is why PDFs and instructions and books about what to do are going to be key, because you can survive on your own. You can go into a mode of self-preservation with you and your family, maybe help neighbors, and in that first 72 hours, help may not be getting to you. Your electricity may not be getting turned on anytime soon. So immediately after this, you need to look at and evaluate the damage, first to persons, humans in and around you. If everybody's safe, then look to damage of your house, your roof, for example. This is what we did after Hurricane Fiona. We said, are we okay? Yes. Okay, we've got fresh water, we've got food. How is the house? Is our shelter okay? Okay, the first thing I did the day after, when it was sunny, because often it's sunny after a natural disaster, I went and started repairing my roof, and I had to go and look around for supplies and resources, and get some shingles from friends who had them. Because again, if you don't have your shelter in place, that's going to be a life-threatening issue for your family in the next 24 hours. Aftershocks from earthquakes, flare-up fires, weakening and breaking of dams, and if these things are part of the disaster or an issue in your area, you need to be aware of them. If there's an earthquake, could a dam break in your location? You need to be aware of that. Anyways, it goes on. It talks about restaurants. Everybody's going to be going out to restaurants. They're going to be using up all the food that the restaurant has. But are you going to be able to pay? Do you need cash in those situations? And that's it. Essential communications are going to be disrupted, and it's going to be hard to get information. So you need all these radios and different avenues to collect information so that you know what's going on, so that you know what's coming to you and when, so that you can address those in your own manner, and hopefully you're prepared to deal with whatever information is coming your way. So just an interesting doc. It goes on and speaks about the challenge of communications, but the whole idea of communications down during a disaster, what happens in the first 72 hours. Are you prepared to survive on your own for the first 24, 48, 72 hours, whatever it may be, couple of weeks in the case of Hurricane Fiona? Are you prepared to hunker down and survive? And that's what we had to do for that first 24, 48 hours of that disaster. Now, even a big snowfall where we are is a big deal. There was 4 years ago, we had a snowfall where we had like 2 meters of snow. The main road was not plowed for the first 48 hours. we had to survive on our own. We had to, borrow milk from the neighbor. Are you prepared? So I'll leave it there, guys. Thanks for watching. Make sure you get all your survival documents on USB drives, and buy an old-fashioned set of Encyclopedia Britannica. Just stick that on a shelf somewhere, and you may never use it. But when the time comes, maybe that sort of thing will be helpful. So thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video.